Our agenda for today will be looking at what is SharePoint, what the SharePoint plans with Office 365 include. We'll do some brief working with SharePoint, so hopefully some uploading some documents, give you a bit of idea how to do the very, very basics. We'll cover some simple site administration, so some basic tips on how to do a bit of admin, give you a bit of an idea on permissions, because permissions obviously are required and will be important if you're moving your file data into SharePoint and OneDrive. We'll cover some quick basic customization, so how you can give it a bit of a different look and feel very quickly, have our best practices, and then also have our takeaways. So please be aware we're covering a significant amount of information here in a 45-minute session, so a lot of it we can only just briefly touch on. And again, if you want more, please let us know and we can start breaking out that into more detail and having more deep dive sessions. So with that, the very first question that we probably need to answer is actually what is SharePoint? So when you're talking about SharePoint to a customer, I think it's very important not to use confusing terms like collaboration, like intranet. The easiest way to describe it I've found to customers is to tell them that it's basically a tool. Okay, so it's a tool to help them do their job. It's a tool to help them surface information. It's a tool to help them find information. It's a tool to help them share information. So again, don't get too confused about what SharePoint is. Basically, it's a tool. Another way to think about it is that it's simply an extension of your existing Office desktop software. So things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and even Outlook can be used as an extension of SharePoint. So think of SharePoint as a way to bring all that information, all that Office documentation, plus other stuff, all together in one simple web-based location that people can access anywhere at any time. Now, remember that customers generally are looking for things, preferably tools, to solve their business problems. Why is Microsoft Office, and especially something like Excel, such a common product on customers' desktops? Because it gives them the flexibility to create a solution that they need. Now, in many cases, it's not the best solution. In many cases, they need more training, but they use it because it gives them that flexibility to create exactly what they want quickly and easily. And something like SharePoint is in fact no different to that. It's an extension of their abilities to do that. So again, don't get lost in the big enterprisey terms of document management, especially when you're talking to customers who've never experienced SharePoint before. Highlight that it is basically a tool that they can customize to solve their business pain points. Now, don't forget that SharePoint is also used to surface other technologies from Microsoft, so like Project Online, CRM Online, Power BI. All of these are surfaced basically through SharePoint. So SharePoint is a critical technology that has been around since before the year 2000. So it's not a new technology, and now it's becoming more and more dependent that it's being used with cloud-based systems like Office 365. So let's dive in and just clarify some of the different versions of SharePoint. Now, there are fundamentally two on-premise versions which many people are probably familiar with. The one that most people are probably familiar with is SharePoint Foundation. Now, that SharePoint Foundation was part of Small Business Server. So you would have Windows SharePoint Services or SharePoint 2010 Foundation, for example. Then the upscale model on-premise was SharePoint Server, so SharePoint Server 2013, 2010, or whatever. Now, in the cloud, we have two very similar versions as well. We have basically what's known as Plan 1 and Plan 2. So in rough terms, SharePoint Foundation is very much like Plan 1, and SharePoint Server is a lot like Plan 2. So again, think of it in those sort of terms if you're familiar with the on-premise versions. Now, what does Foundation or Plan 1 include? So Foundation and Plan 1 with Office 365 includes all the core functionality. So you can basically create document libraries, lists, calendars, contacts, upload documents into it, connect to your Office documents. All the basics that you're used to doing with SharePoint can be done with Plan 1 or the Foundation on-premise. Now, Plan 2 provides all of the facilities of Plan 1, but includes things like our social networking, our business integration with SQL databases, allows us to create intelligent forms, use enterprise content management, and do things like e-discovery, hold, and export. So again, Foundation, which is the standard version you get with SharePoint, is all the base stuff you need for most people, and then Plan 2 adds all the enterprise and advanced features on top of that. So what is SharePoint Online? Okay, so let's have a look at what actually SharePoint Online is. So basically at the moment, as we stand, SharePoint Online is SharePoint Server 2013. Very much the same sort of functionality that now Microsoft has installed and is running in their data centers. If you've ever tried to install SharePoint Server 2013 on premise, you know it's quite a complex job. It requires multi-server environment, it requires Office web apps, it requires indexing servers, SQL servers, so that's quite a complex beast these days to maintain. Now, SharePoint Online includes what's called team site. So a team site is a location where users can put information that they're working on together that no individual generally owns themselves. So again, think of a team site typically of what we've seen before with our Windows SharePoint services. But SharePoint Online now also includes OneDrive for Business. So important distinction here is that OneDrive for Business is a SharePoint solution. It has SharePoint technologies, and it is basically a limited version of a team site that each individual gets. So within a business, when you buy Office 365 that includes a SharePoint SKU, you will get a team site for all the users, and each user will get a OneDrive for Business. SharePoint Online also includes Office Online. So this means that you can edit and view all your Office documents basically in a browser. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, all those sort of applications you can edit, update, save, create directly in a web browser using Office Online. You can obviously use your traditional desktop, but the SharePoint Online comes with the ability to work with Office Online. It also includes encryption at rest. So what that means is the data that is stored in SharePoint on the file servers that are in Microsoft's data center are encrypted at rest. So every piece of data is basically broken up into smaller components, given its own encryption key, stored on different databases on different servers. So again, this conforms to all the major security requirements like HIPAA and EU Safe Harbor. So again, very secure, very strong out of the box. The other thing that it includes SharePoint Online, it also has the ability to have what's called free external user access. So what that means is you can have an external third party who only needs a Microsoft account, Hotmail, or whatever, and they can access, you can give them access to your SharePoint site without any cost. So that means they can come in and contribute to your site, upload documents, view documents, and collaborate in a project environment without any additional cost. There are free there is no restriction on how many external users you can have. And what we're seeing now is that SharePoint Online is now including Yammer. So Yammer is an enterprise social network that allows people to collaborate better and basically surface information that would normally be siloed within emails. So what plans include SharePoint in Office 365? So the first place to start is you can buy SharePoint as a standalone product. You can buy that with Plan 1 features or Plan 2 features standalone. So no email, no Skype for Business, basically standalone plans. Now that will include, as I've got the icons here, a SharePoint team site, OneDrive for Business, and also Yammer in both plans. Then you could also buy OneDrive for Business. So for example, some of the business plans include just OneDrive for Business standalone, which means every user gets their own personal area to store information. They don't get a team collaboration site, but they do get their own storage site with OneDrive for Business. But you can certainly buy that standalone. Now, if you buy the business plans, which are the Business Essentials and the Business Premium, you're going to get SharePoint Online Plan 1 included in that suite, which means you'll get team sites, OneDrive for Business, and Yammer. Now, if you buy Enterprise E1, you're going to again get SharePoint Online Plan 2 with all the features of Plan 1 with all the features of Plan 1, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Yammer. But when you go to the E3 and the E4 plan, that's when there's an upgrade. You are now utilizing SharePoint Online Plan 2 with all the features, the enterprise features that I indicated previously. So Online Plan 2 has the more advanced features, form services, access services, those sort of things. And again, you only see those typically in E3 and E4 plans. Now, the other option that you do have, there are kiosk licenses. Kiosk licenses are a very cheap way for users who are only using the web to access the SharePoint Teams site. So kiosk users don't get a OneDrive for Business, but they do get the ability to access the Teams site typically via a browser. So great for back office, maybe a warehouse, people on the road who don't need huge amounts of access. So what's the difference between Plan 1 and Plan 2? Now, importantly, as I note there, both of them include Team sites, OneDrive for Business, and Yammer. So Plan 2 includes everything in Plan 1, plus it includes Excel services, which means you're able to basically embed complex Excel spreadsheets and display them directly in a browser. Access services, you're basically able to publish a database up from Access up to SharePoint, which means that, for example, you could put a web front end on a complex database solution and provide a nice solution quickly for users. It also includes form services. So InfoPath is something that comes with Office Pro Plus, allows you to create what's called complex forms. So what I mean by a complex form is the form can say, for example, that the input field, maybe it's a phone number, is not in the right format. Maybe the postcode is too big. Quantity times price to give you a total result. So an intelligent form does a lot of work behind the scenes. You can create that in InfoPath, publish that into your SharePoint Online Plan 2, and users can use that. So a great way to help reduce the paper overhead within an office. Plan 2 also includes e-discovery, hold, and export. So all SharePoint plans include the ability to run searches across the information. But if you want to place an item on hold, which means that if a user makes changes to it, the original is kept for legal purposes, or you want to export that information so that maybe it's got to go as a legal request to another business, you can only do that with Plan 2. And there are a number of other advanced options that are available only in Plan 2 as opposed to Plan 1. So again, make sure that you check the differences between the plans, and as we've mentioned before, it's much easier now to upgrade from any of the suite standalone plans into more advanced plans. You can also mix and match between plans, so that means you can target users who have the need with the right license SKU. So let's look at some of the specifications, some low-level details. So a team site, which is the common area that all people within the business have access to work on information as a group. At the moment, you get 10 gigabytes of space plus half a gig per user. So if you've got 10 users, you get an extra 5 gig of space, giving you 15 gigs in total. Now, Microsoft recently announced that they will be increasing this limit shortly to a starting point of 1 terabyte for all team sites, and then another half gig per user. So again, people who have those already set up will see that increase available. We expect that in the next month or so. OneDrive for Business, basically every user currently gets 1 terabyte of space per user. So you can see the big difference at the moment between a team site and OneDrive for Business. Remember, that 1 terabyte is per user. OneDrive for Business is designed to be a location in which users can store their personal files. So rather than storing it on their C drive, the idea is that they put it into their OneDrive and make it available wherever they are. You'll also notice that there are a number of dedicated apps on devices that allow you to quickly and easily access that information no matter where you are. Now, as with team sites, the team sites are scaling up from 10 gig to 1 terabyte. OneDrive for Business is also being scaled up to effectively unlimited per user. So there'll be no limit on how much individual information that a user can put in their OneDrive for Business. So remember, I mentioned that there's also free unlimited external user access. So as long as an external user has a Microsoft account which they can tie to their existing email address, you can then provide them access to an area within your SharePoint team site, and they can come in and collaborate as a full user to work with you. So this is a very good way to work with what they call an extranet, external parties, projects. Great way also for resellers potentially to work with their customers. They could have a customer portal in SharePoint, and then they could share that via an email address with their external users. You get over 500,000 site collections, so you potentially can have unique, so think of a site collection at this point as a unique URL. So maybe you have a site collection which is for your documents, maybe you have a site collection that is potentially for your public documents, you may have another site collection for managers, accounts, so you can break this up and you can have basically 500,000 of those unique URLs which have their own properties, securities and accesses. Now of course, if the 10 gig limit at the moment isn't suitable for you, you can purchase additional storage. So you can purchase additional gigs per month for a very small charge and add that to the overall pool that you can work with. Again, when the sites do scale up to 1 terabyte, what we'll see is that additional storage then will simply be added on to that terabyte. So again, if you need to get started, if you need more than the 10 gig starting limit, you can certainly add the space that you need today by purchasing additional storage and adding that to the SKU. So let's have a look at how we actually work with SharePoint now that we've covered off hopefully what it is and how it is surfaced through Office 365. Now the very first point that I will call out to you is that Office 365 is not Server 365. Now what I mean by that is that it is not just a simple process of copying files from your on-premise file shares into somewhere like OneDrive or into somewhere like a team site. The important thing to remember here is SharePoint is a collaboration platform first and foremost. So it's a system that's designed to have document management, things like check-in, check-out, version control. Again, it's a very different environment from what most users are used to with traditional files and folders. So again, not that it's better, not that it's worse, it's just important to understand that is not a file server in the cloud. It is actually so much more than that. I would also put it to you that if all you're looking for is just a place to store information, okay, so if you're just looking to, or clients are just looking to have a place in the cloud that, so they don't have to have an on-premise file server and they want to maintain exactly the same look and feel, map drives, files and folders, very simple files and folders like they have now, SharePoint may not be the best solution for you because it's going to cause them a lot of frustration. Now, the thing I would say is that most clients who initially say that they want just files and folders and want it simple, once they see the features, once they start using the features of SharePoint, they see the benefit, they appreciate the value of the product. And that's where it's important from a reseller's point of view to make sure that you highlight all the value, all the features, all the additional things that SharePoint can do above and beyond what a traditional file system can do, because in a lot of cases that's where users want to work. So typically people will have information in their emails, they'll have attachments, they'll have files in their file shares, they might have conversations and other information. That's all in different locations currently, but something like SharePoint, which is a true collaboration platform, can bring all that information into one area, and then you can permission that and potentially make that available to external parties. So rather than it being in multiple locations spread over multiple people, you can put it in one location in a nice web interface that everybody can interact with. Remember that if you're just selling pure storage, so if you copy files or move them from a file server based system of storage to a web version of storage, there's not much productivity gain there. They're just files and folders again. You lose a lot of the power that you get with version control, check-in, check-out, version history, document routing, all these really powerful features that people need to control their information. So again, I don't see a lot of advantage or a lot of productivity gains to be made by simply moving information from a on-premise storage to a cloud storage without adding features and benefits. And that's exactly what something like SharePoint can do. And remember that, again, to get the most out of it, you need to use the tool in the right way. So sure, you can use something like Excel as a word processor. You can type in things in the field and you can do edits and you can do spell checking, but Excel is not the best tool to do something like word processing. So again, this is where you need to appreciate what the product can do, what its strengths are, what its limitations are, and again, make some adjustments. And again, the benefits outweigh the disadvantages, but most importantly, it is a very different environment than most people are familiar with. So when we look at the structure of SharePoint at a very high level, what we have is a site collection. So a unique site collection which we create in Office 365. Now inside that site collection is a home site, okay, the top level site, so think of it like a file structure or a tree. Within that site we can have a number of different apps. So in this case we have so we appreciate if anybody's not on mute, if they could mute themselves. So basically what it is I have an app. So in here I have three apps. A document library is an app, a calendar is an app, and a contact is an app. So I add an app to my site. Inside that app are items. So inside my document library are files. Inside my calendar app are calendar appointments. Inside my contacts are individual contacts. Now also within a site I can create a number of subsites. So a subsite is basically replicating this site at a further level. Now why would I do that? Now let's say for example I have a top level site that everybody can get to, but maybe this subsite here is just for accounts. This subsite here is just for HR. So again, I can now start creating sub areas for each one of those locations. Now each of those locations can have their own apps, they can have their own subsites, they can have their own items, they have their own security. So again, think of it like a tree structure. The site collection contains all the sites, and then you start with a root site at the top which can have apps, and then you can build off from that further subsites and items below that. So again, it's a bit like a file structure, but again, think of it like a website in that respect that I can add all different applications to. So the most common item that you'll be working with is a document library. Now a document library is designed for documents. Now what we can do here is we can upload documents into this, but we can also create new documents from the menu across the top. We can also upload a single file at a time, so we can just use the upload button and we can upload a single file. But we can also upload multiple files by dragging and dropping and basically mapping our Windows Explorer. We can also use the OneDrive for Business Sync tool. So all the document libraries within SharePoint as well as OneDrive for Business can be synchronized to the user's desktop. Now there are limits around what works and what doesn't work there, but you can certainly synchronize that information to a desktop. Now you can also, of course, use third-party tools as well to achieve that. So don't rule out the fact that there are third-party tools available to do that. So what we'll do is we'll keep working through this, and if time permits we'll just jump into a demo and I'll show you some screenshots, but let me keep moving through the material here just so we can make sure that we cover all that and then swap over to the demo. Now let's talk about some simple site administration. How do we do some basic site administration? Well, the way that we do that is we go to the cog in the top right corner of our SharePoint site and we select that. Now once we select that, we should see a menu that is displayed, and the menu option that we need to select here is called Site Settings. Okay, so once we select Site Settings, what it will reveal is a whole lot of administration options down here that you can now work with. Now, probably the one that is most important to you, the most common, is down here under Site Administration called Regional Settings. Now, Unfortunately, when a SharePoint site is provisioned for the first time, as with our Windows desktops generally, they're provisioned out of a time zone of the US or a region of the US. So we need to generally go in there and select on regional settings and then make those changes to put it in the appropriate time zone that we require. So again, that's probably the very first and most important thing in site settings you will need to go into. But again, if time permits, what we'll do is we'll go in and I will show you how to work with those site settings. But the way you get to it is, again, the cog in the top right corner of a SharePoint site, then select Site Settings, and then you will see in here that you can get to the permissions, you can change some of the design options, you can change the look and the feel, which we'll come to. So again, that's how you get to the basic administration. Now, each site or sub-site will have its own site settings. So these site settings are unique to the site that I set in. So as I navigate down the tree, each site, unique site in the structure, will have its own unique site settings. So beware of that. So you can change the look and the feel of a sub-site and it won't affect the parent. Okay, so one of the other most common questions I see out there is, how do we manage permissions? So again, think of permissions very much like a file system. So here's our structure again. So our typical structure, we have a boundary at our site collection, a boundary at our site. All our apps have individual security boundaries as well as our items and our subsites flowing down the tree. Now, basically the most important thing to remember is that your rights are inherited by default. So once you create the top level site, and then if you go in and create another site below that, it will by default inherit the rights of the parent site. If I create an app and then I add items into that app, they will inherit the rights from that application immediately. Now, of course, we can go in individually and we can basically break that inheritance. So what that means is, it's much like a file system, we can stop any app, any item, any subsite from inheriting rights from the parent. And again, we just simply go in there, select that, and then stop that inheritance, and then we add the rights into that. Now again, there isn't at this stage a simple tool that allows you to look through the rights in the whole SharePoint structure, so it is a bit manual to go through all this, so that's why it's very important to make sure that you have a good policy, good handling of how you set up permissions. Now, when we look at the permissions on the screen, so this is a screenshot of what we would typically see in maybe a document library, you can see that we have basically stopped inheriting the rights. Now, what that means is in this location, the user rights are unique to that location, and we can go in and add either groups or we can add users into these locations. Now, obviously, as with a file system, the best way to manage SharePoint is to use security groups. Now, Office 365 allows us to create security groups which can then be placed inside SharePoint groups. Now, that means that when we assign a user to a security group in Office 365, they'll automatically get rights that flow into SharePoint. So, best practice is always to use groups to achieve that. Now, of course, there are times when you need to potentially assign an individual user, but if you can avoid that, like a file system, it makes life around managing permissions much easier. So as you see across the top here, we could delete the unique permissions. If we deleted the unique permissions, that would then inherit the rights back from the parent. So we just click that button, we'll get the same rights flowing through. We can grant permissions, so we go in there and add new users, add new groups to the SharePoint location to give them access to that. We can obviously go in and select a user, and as you'll see, our Excel services viewers is currently set to a permission of view only. So we have a number of different permission levels in SharePoint by default, things like approve, design, read, contribute. They provide a different level of access. Most users in Office 365 are members. They have a contribute right by default. That contribute right gives them the ability to edit, create, and potentially delete files as well. So they're given those rights by default in the team site, and unless that's changed, they will flow down through the structure. But here we can select the user, we can go in and then edit that user, and we may change their rights. Potentially, let's say we change them from view only to maybe contribute. So you can change each user's individual right level. We can remove their permissions, so again that user will not appear there. And if we're having issues with permissions, we can again go in, click on the check permissions button, and we can type in a user, and that will then tell us how the user has rights to that location. So again, in simple terms, think of a SharePoint permissions very much like a file system. They flow down the tree or down the structure by default. You can go into each item and you can break the inheritance and then create your own rights, and you can assign whatever permissions you want at those locations. So let's talk about some basic customizations. You can customize the site logo. You can change the look of SharePoint, so the color, the background. You can add an image. Again, very much quick and easy to do that. You can modify the navigation. You can drag and drop the menu on the left-hand side, and you can edit that to suit your needs. You can edit the home page. We can add more widgets to the home page and maybe surface a calendar, contacts, something else that we've created in SharePoint. Now, when we edit a home page, we can obviously delete web parts, so we can remove what's on the page if we don't want. We can add more to the page, and if we want, we can change how many columns that we display on that page. So with all that, we've run through all that. So let me now swap across to give you some indication of how this actually works in reality. So give it a minute to come through. Now, when it does come through, you should see a standard SharePoint site. Okay, so hopefully now you are seeing a standard SharePoint site that I've created in my Office 365. So what I have here is I have a basic document library, and that's empty at this point in time. Now, the first thing I can do to get documents in here, I can go in here and I can create a Word, Excel, PowerPoint document, and that will open a blank document in Word Online. I can now do some edits, save that file, and it will appear in my library. You'll notice that I can also create a new folder, so if you wanted to have folders within a document library, you certainly can do that. The second way that I can do it is to get a file in here. I can select upload, and it'll then pop open a window. I can then browse, and for example, I can go to my C drive, hopefully, and then I can select an individual file and then upload that file. So we go to my downloads, and let's just upload this one, and that will then, as you see, I can put the version information there. You'll see that I get the upload, and there that file has now been uploaded into that location. Now, if I select the tabs across the top here, you'll see it looks very much like the traditional Word and desktop products. You'll see that I have an option here called Open with Explorer. Now, if I select that, that will take a minute to launch the Windows Explorer desktop application, and you'll see what it does is it will then map my SharePoint library directly to that location using Windows Explorer. It doesn't want to do it because I'm running Windows 10, and then you can drag and drop into that library. So you certainly can use that Windows Explorer option to map directly to this location, and then you can basically drag and drop files. Now, the other way that we can do this, for example, is, again, what you may not appreciate is if I go to my C drive again, go to my downloads, and maybe pick a couple of files here. So let's pick these two. I can now drag and drop these directly onto the browser. So as I drop it over the browser, you'll see in the background there that it is uploading those files for me. Now, the other option here is I can synchronize. So now once the files are in this document library, if I now push sync, it will now run the OneDrive for Business Sync client in the background. It will now start synchronizing those files to a location basically on my desktop. I just hit sync now, and that synchronizing will take place, hopefully. And what we should see then is that in our list of files here, which I've already done, you see that I have my OneDrive for Business. I've already got some files here that are synced, and you'll also see that I have a number of SharePoint document libraries. So I'm synchronizing both my SharePoint and my OneDrive for Business at the same time. So here's my OneDrive for Business, and here's some synchronized SharePoint document libraries. So that's the other way that we can get information into that. Now, to quickly look at the site settings, so again, we go up to the cog in the top right corner, we go into site settings, okay, and that'll take us into the admin area at the back, as I showed you. Now, again, the important thing here, probably for most people, is to select regional settings. So if you select regional settings, you'll see here that I can change the time zone, but unfortunately what happens 9 times out of 10 is the English is set to the US rather than Australia, so we get funny dollars and funny month, day, time. We set that to Australia, and then basically go down the bottom, go OK. That will save that, then apply that throughout our organization, throughout our structure, or throughout this site in this case. So again, that's how we work on that. To work on permissions, again, I go into basically what I'll do here is I will show you the permissions for a document library. So I go into my library again. You'll see over here that I have library settings on the right hand side. If I select that and go into the permissions for this document library, now I'm working on the permissions just for this dedicated app. And at the moment, you'll see that it is inheriting permissions from the parent, which is the site. Now, if I want to change that, I can, whoops, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to manage the parent. I wanted to stop inheriting permissions. So it's now going to say, do you want to do that? I go, okay. It's now going to create unique permissions. So now what I can do, for example, say, you know what, I don't want visitors and Excel services people to be in here, so I'm going to remove those users. What I'm also going to do is, for example, grant permissions to a user. So if I put in a user here, it should do an Office 365 lookup for me. Select options because I don't want them to get an email, and you'll see that I can select their potential permission level. So in this case, I'll leave them as contribute and go share, and we'll now see that that person has been added to the permissions for this location. Remember, these are unique. Now, if I want to overwrite those and basically inherit again, I just select the delete unique permissions. It says, do you want to do that? And you'll see that it will be put back to the way it was before. So that's how easy it is to basically do the permissions. But as with a file system, make sure that you plan that out and manage it, because being a web-based system, it is a little bit more cumbersome to work with than a file system. Now we can change, for example, the logo that I mentioned in this top left corner. So the way we do that is we go into our site settings, and one of the options here is title, description, and logo. So I'm going to select that. Then I'm going to go in here and insert the logo from my computer. I will now browse to that location. I've uploaded a graphic, so I'll just pick a standard graphic here, go OK, and that will now, should have now uploaded it and put it into the location. Again, there it is. Well, it's not displaying, which is unfortunate, but again, I am using Windows 10 here, so I haven't worked out all the kinks, but typically what you would see, I'll just try that once more. So let me upload from computer, browse to that, and basically it should upload directly into this, and go OK. Let's see what happens this time. Put it in that location. If I go OK, does it save it? No, it doesn't like it for some reason. Okay, well, we won't dwell on that, but that's basically how you would add a logo to the top corner there. Now, to change the look again, I can go into the settings up here. I can go into an option here called change the look. Now what change the look will do, it will allow you to apply some overall branding to your site quickly and easily. So you see here I've got a number of templates. So let's say that I want to make this one green. So I select the green option. What I can do is I could drag an image here, or I could, again, change the background here. So that probably won't display. So again, just upload the image. I can change the colors, my scheme, but I'm happy with that. I go try it out. It will now show me an overlay of that site, and then I can then apply it to my complete SharePoint site. Now, where this is very handy is when you have multiple subsites and people moving between different locations, you can generally change the look and the feel quite quickly and quite easily, so that they know where they are navigating at any point in time. So again, my machine here seems to be playing up a bit. Here we go. Okay, so it's now applied that. We'll now hopefully see an update. I'm going to select to keep that just anyway. And that will now apply green over the top of my site quickly and easily. So if I go back to my Dicker data site here, you'll see that again, I have now got a green look and feel. As I mentioned, you can edit the navigation bar. So if I hit the edit, you'll see that I can add a link. I can delete these links. I can actually drag and drop these links. So for example, I should be able to move documents under site content, save that. You'll see that the navigation is different. I can also edit the links across the top of the page here to update that. Now, if I want to change the look of the page, as I mentioned before, I can go in here and I can go edit the page. So I'm now editing this front page. You'll see what I can do, for example, is you know what, I don't want this widget on the page, so I'm going to delete that. Yes, that's going to remove it. So it just removes the widget. It doesn't delete the data. So again, think of it like a widget on the page. I can now type in some text. I can now format that with the ribbon basically across the top here. And if I wanted to, for example, I could go and insert another web part, and I can put any other item that is part of my SharePoint site into that location. So again, nice and easy to do that. When I've finished with that, I simply save the page and it will then apply those updates and display that on the page for me. Again, what I can do is if I edit the page, I can go in here and you'll see that I can quickly change the text layout from what it is now with a header and 2 columns, and let's say maybe I just want 1 column, and then save that. You'll see that it updates that display to be that immediately. So that's how easy it is to do some basic customizations of the SharePoint site, change the layout. But as you hopefully can appreciate, there's a significant amount of more that can be done with SharePoint, and just giving you a quick overview on that. So let me just jump back to the slides here, and I will wrap up this webinar. Okay, so that was a very, very quick demo. So some best practices for you. SharePoint is more than just web storage, okay, which means you're going to have to invest a bit of time understanding how it's different, why it's different, some of the differences, and obviously conveying that to customers. Team sites are always the best place for shared files. A lot of people seem to think that OneDrive is the place to replace a file server. I think that you find many, many restrictions, and the limitations that OneDrive applies can cause issues down the track. So if multiple people need to work on files in a team together, then a team site is the best location. OneDrive is for individual files typically. Again, SharePoint can do a huge amount of stuff. It's an absolute, it's just so much of what it can do. But again, the secret to it is just keep it simple. Start off with a document library, start off with shared calendar, start off with something really simple and build from there. Again, think of it like a tool like Excel, which can improve, enhance, and grow over time. Again, just keep it simple, do the basics, and get people using it. Again, the basic admin tasks like setting the regional settings, the time, the date, the look and the feel, the menu structure. Again, we've been big on checklists here. Make sure that you create a checklist that allows you to run through those and give a consistent result for customers. So maybe when you run up Office 365, you give them a basic SharePoint site to get them started and get them interested. And again, template and checklist how to do that. As for permissions like file systems, assign them as high as possible. You don't want to go down and be assigning individual permissions to individual files within low level or deep inside the SharePoint structure. It becomes very difficult for someone to manage down the track. So again, like a file system, manage the permissions if you can at the file share or the folder level. In this case, manage them at the site or the app level. Too deep becomes very difficult and cumbersome to manage. And again, my advice is you can certainly customize SharePoint using HTML, JavaScript, all that sort of stuff, but try and stick to the customizations that are in the browser. That means when things change, when there's an upgrade, when the SharePoint 2016 is released into Office 365, you won't generally break a lot of things. So you can certainly customize it to a low level with a web developer, but just beware this on shared infrastructure, which means when things change, Microsoft may not make you aware of that, and they may break something that's been custom coded. So try and stick to customizations within the browser. So my takeaways are SharePoint's a tool for solving business pain points. Okay, look for what you can solve with SharePoint, simplifying, collaborating on information. And again, SharePoint can do a lot of things. It can do document management, document flows, workflows, so much that we can't just cover here. So really appreciate that it's a very, very powerful tool. OneDrive is a subset of SharePoint. OneDrive is SharePoint, but has a limited set of features in what it can do. It's basically a document library. Some SharePoint skills are going to be required. No matter what you're working with in Office 365 in reseller land, you're going to need to understand at least the basics of SharePoint. How to upload documents, create apps, manage site collections, manage permissions. You're going to have some SharePoint skills. So if you haven't, time to do some study on that. And again, SharePoint and OneDrive are a big change from your traditional files and folders. So make sure that you understand what the differences are, what that impacts for your customers, and explain to them and show them the benefits and those changes so they become comfortable with them. Manage permissions using a group. Again, good practice using any sort of structure, even file systems. Manage via groups, don't do it via individuals. And when it comes to making major changes to look and feel, again, focus on the functionality first. Okay, so focus on the function rather than the way it looks. Okay, so get the function, get it doing what it needs to do, and then look at customizing the look and the feel. So some resources that will be available in the slides for you after are the SharePoint Online Overview for IT pros. The service descriptions will cover what each plan within SharePoint includes, and there are SharePoint Online training courses, videos, and tutorials that will give you more information and take you to the next level with SharePoint.